Today, in Donald Trump's desperate and ongoing effort to whitewash his own story and our country's history, burnish his very tarnished image, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Trump and his allies have discussed pushing lawmakers to pass a resolution aimed at voiding his first-term impeachment. So that's according to people familiar with the matter, while pretending to undo Trump's record as the only American president to be impeached twice by bipartisan groups of members might serve Trump's ego by way of abusing the federal government. It would carry no legal significance. There's zero precedent or procedure in the Constitution for undoing a past impeachment. But as the Wall Street Journal reports, quote, any move to attempt to erase the two impeachments in 2019 and 2021 would open up a debate about Trump's past behavior in office, forcing Republican lawmakers to relitigate charges of abuse of power, obstruction of Congress, and inciting an insurrection. While overnight, Trump called for the expulsion of Congressman Jamie Raskin, lashing out at one of his biggest perceived political enemies and thorns in his side over what will almost certainly be Trump's third impeachment next year, should Democrats take control of the House. I want to bring in that thorn, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's a ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. I wonder what you make of Trump's obsession with the two impeachments.
Well, he's certainly having some nightmare flashbacks this week to it. Of course, the easy way to avoid impeachment is to stop engaging in impeachable offenses, stop committing high crimes and misdemeanors, then you've got nothing to worry about. But look, that has been the organizing theme of his presidency outside of money making and profiteering on the backs of the American people. He wants to somehow insinuate into the national consciousness that he won the 2020 presidential election, which he lost by more than 7 million votes to Joe Biden on a vote of 306 to 232. And then, therefore, that somehow justified a mass mob violent assault on our police officers on the Capitol, storming of the Capitol, chanting "Hang Mike Pence," driving us out of the proceeding to constitute the peaceful transfer of power. He's obsessed with it because he knows he's wrong. I mean, there's some deformed core of a conscience in there that makes him return to the scene of the crime the way that the criminals always do. So there are, of course, as you say, Nicole, no provision in the Constitution for expunging an impeachment. But if they want to have a resolution saying they disagree with that vote of 232 to 197 that we had, including 10 Republicans who joined all the Democrats, they should go ahead and have a resolution and say they think that Donald Trump won the election. They think that that violent insurrection was justified. They wanted the inside political coup to transpire. And then let's get them all on record. And like, enough is enough. But remember, 60 federal and state court judgments ruled against Donald Trump uniformly that there was no electoral fraud and there was no electoral corruption. So all of this is a fantasy on his part. And the question is how deeply this rot has sunk into the consciousness of his MAGA cult members that they're actually willing to follow him off of the ledge like that.
Do you think it speaks to any premeditation of what he plans to do in November?
Well, we have to be on our guard. He continues to try to attack voting rights organizations like the pro-democracy organization in Ohio, whose office just got raided. They continue to pass different disenfranchisement and voter suppression laws all over the country. And so, rather than have people remember that he tried to steal that election with things that the January 6th Select Committee found, like, for example, him calling up the Secretary of State of Georgia, Mr. Raffensperger, and saying, just find me 11,780 votes, that's all I want. Instead, people are thinking somehow he was cheated out of, a fantastical majority in his head. But look, they've not laid a finger on a single finding of the January 6th Select Committee, and there's not one iota of evidence that Donald Trump won that election. He lost that election soundly to Joe Biden, and that was an insurrection, which is why, his desired attorney general is out there trying to withdraw and vacate the charges against Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who were sentenced to jail for decades for engaging in seditious conspiracy, which means a conspiracy to overthrow and put down the government of the United States. But meantime, not only have they pardoned them, they want to make each one of them into a mega millionaire. And, we've heard from Enrique Tarrio, the head of the Proud Boys. Well, he doesn't need the anti-weaponization fund, which has now been blocked by 2 different federal judges in which the whole country is denouncing. He said he doesn't need that because he'll get millions of dollars directly from the Judgment Fund, which was set up long ago, decades ago, by Congress to pay for verdicts against the United States. Not a single one of these insurrectionists has won any litigation against the government for false or malicious prosecution. It's all a complete charade and a put-on.
Part of the night of testimony that you led for the January 6th Select Committee was sort of about the relationship between the extremists themselves and Trump's inner circle. And when you talk about what Enrique Tarrio has said publicly about knowing the money will come to him one way or another, what Donald Trump has said about the fund being, quote, beautiful, and what the convicted child molester that NPR reported on, telling his child sexual molestation victim to be quiet. When I get my money from the compensation fund, I'll give you some of it if you keep quiet about my crimes. I mean, what if Democrats regain control, what part of the money would you want to investigate, and how would you do that?
Well, let's start with that point you just made. There are 97 pardoned violent and other criminals who were convicted of crimes on January 6th, who've gone on to reoffend ever since Donald Trump granted them their commutation and their pardon. One of them, Andrew Paul Johnson, sexually assaulted a 12-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. And as you say, the months before the public knew anything formal about this, was saying, we all are going to get paid off and I'll share my money with you if you don't turn me into the police. That guy is now doing a life sentence for the crimes he committed against those kids whose lives have now been irrevocably altered by virtue of Donald Trump's decision to pardon them and commute their sentences. So we would like to look at what the effect of that mass pardon was. Remember, up until Donald Trump, all of the other presidents had looked at them case by case, whether somebody had actually expressed remorse and contrition, whether they constituted a safety risk to the public in letting them out, whether they'd paid back their fines, and whether they'd paid back the money owed to their victims. Donald Trump just wiped the slate clean. He has wiped the slate clean for more than $1 billion of restitution and fines that were owed through all of the pardons he's offered, because a lot of them are also to white-collar criminals, fraudsters, convicted fraudsters like himself, who still owed lots of money to their victims. So we're going to get into all of that. People need to see what the corruption has been and then what we can do to try to turn it around, at the same time that we're focusing on the nation that's been victimized by this corruption, as the president has done nothing to get health care to the people, but rather thrown millions of people off of their health care, done nothing to bring down inflation, but rather driven up the price of gasoline to $4.40 or $4.50 a gallon in a lot of places. So we need that forward policy agenda. At the same time, we need to expose all of the corruption that has been crippling our economy.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, thank you so much for your time today. So much work ahead. We appreciate you. Heilman, just quickly on the Congressman's point about pardons, like if you wanted to take just a narrow slice of the bad behavior and a single pool of the bad guys Trump's associated with, you could do what the Congressman just said. You could take all the pardoned insurrectionists and really shine a light on the recidivism, the depravity of their crimes. I mean, they talked about one of the Trump insurrectionists went on to molest 2 children, is now serving a life sentence. And the money. Like, how did they know before Todd Blanche did that they were going to get paid for their crimes?
Yeah, I think that one of the things, I mean, look, this is always a challenge for you're thinking about this in the political context, shining a light in terms of like doing ads or whatever. I think that for a lot of Democrats, the sins that Donald Trump is directly, you're sitting there, you're kind of trying to decide. You have Donald Trump, who promised throughout an entire campaign that he was going to lower prices for people and care about the economy. And now you have him on tape saying, I don't think about people's financial well-being. And I love the inflation, right? That's an ad that I think will test quite strongly when it gets put together. the ad that shines a light on some of these insurrectionists, it's not that you and I can't make the case for why that reflects badly on Donald Trump. You can, but it's not as direct, right? These are bad guys. People don't approve of the insurrectionists broadly in the country, but it's a two-part argument. Well, here are these people. We're shining a light on these people. And also, Donald Trump, who's probably not in photographs with any of them, who he's not praised specifically. It's just a little bit more of a reach when you have this low-hanging fruit where on the most important issue that people care about, you have so much devastating, damaging data and video. I think a lot of people are going to choose to go with that first, with the economic argument rather than this other argument, although I think obviously this argument on the merits, the argument about the insurrectionists, is incredibly powerful and damning, but maybe not quite as ad-friendly as some of the others.
It's just when you think about how far from anything politically normal we are. Trump pardoned someone who went on to molest 2 children.
Look, I mean...
It would stop the country in its tracks if it were anyone else.
Trump pardoned people who beat police officers with flagpoles.
Yeah.
I mean, the recidivism makes it all the more outrageous, galling, morally indefensible. But the initial pardon was indefensible. I mean, and you think about what the worst, if you shone a light on the worst behavior of the insurrectionists on that day, you don't need to get, the recidivism makes it, compounds the problem, but the initial crime of the pardon, which is to say, moral crime of it, it's one of it continues to this day to be of the things in Trump 2.0 from the moment it happened until today that I find most outrageous and morally disturbing, galling. The thing that makes me angriest is thinking about those pardons, and it was like that when he first issued them, and it still is today.
Yeah.